Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. Starting next week, the process to tear down buildings in Wheatley will begin. This comes years after an explosion in the downtown core. Plus, we're going to introduce you to the new host of Afternoon Drive while we introduce him to a Windsor delicacy. And we have a Rose City Rewind tonight that will send chills up your spine despite the nice warm day we just had. Work will soon begin on the demolition of condemned buildings in downtown Wheatley. The buildings sit in an evacuation zone where a gas explosion leveled much of the downtown area in 2021. As Dale Molnar reports, some will be sad to see the buildings go.
6 buildings on Talbot Street East, as well as 3 on Erie Street North, will be torn down. The municipality says contractors will be on site starting Monday to begin the process. Barry Broadbent owns the Car Bar and Restaurant, which is one of the buildings to be demolished. He says crews will begin looking through the buildings on Monday to see what can be salvaged.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough day, obviously, for everybody that's involved with their businesses. It's been really hard on the town of Wheatley and the folks that live in Wheatley. It's a lot of the businesses. Some of them are reopening, some of them aren't reopening.
When these buildings get torn down later in May, Wheatley's not just going to be losing some structures, it's going to be losing part of its history.
That building over there was a movie theater.
Town historian Terry Lobson is sad to see the buildings go. He says the car barn has a storied history.
It goes way back to, there's some running days, or some connections to those times. With cars, as it was a garage at one time, and they would drive up the highway if the cops were on their tail and drop their load in the cistern in the floor, take off, and then go north of town here.
It used to be a billiard hall. It used to be a bowling alley, a 5-pin bowling alley. So it's an old institution. It's called the Car Barn for a reason. It was a garage at one point.
Well, one thing I think is the most disappointing, there's never been any effort to save any of this history. It's more or less just going to be trucked away and gone forever, and that's really sad.
After the buildings are torn down, Broadbent hopes the threat of gas leaks can be eliminated so the property can once again be redeveloped with new businesses.
I think their plan is to buy up all the properties, demolition the properties, and then excavate to see if they can find the source of the gas and bring it to a finality so that eventually someday in the future, we'll be able to rebuild on that particular site.
Demolition is expected to begin no later than June 3rd and could continue for several months. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Wheatley.
State of emergency has been called in Amjanong First Nation near Sarnia. First Nation officials announced that late yesterday, which comes a week after writing a letter to government officials urging action on benzene pollution. Preliminary monitoring data indicate high levels. The First Nation blames a plastics chemical plant next door. That company plans a temporary shutdown for maintenance and a mechanical issue. It also faces Environment Ministry orders related to benzene levels and monitoring them. People working for the City of Windsor say they're worried about favoritism and discrimination in the workplace. Staff say they're also worried about retaliation from management for suggesting ideas. This is all according to an outside consultant's report on employee experience at City Hall. The 39-page document was reviewed by council this week. Focus groups, interviews, and surveys were used to gauge how employees felt working for the city. A key concern is psychological safety. One councillor believes it underscores a culture of fear at the city. A consultant who worked on the report told council there's work to be done.
It was raised in some of the sentiment around feelings of, it being like an old boys club in certain circumstances, or, there were some raised concerns, but I wouldn't say that it was, by and large, as you were noting, like what was the elevation of fear. I do think that the city, and I know that the city is advancing on its direction towards diversity, equity, inclusion. I know that there's a few initiatives underway in that regard. I think that would actually help the culture.
This comes on the heels of a recently filed wrongful dismissal lawsuit by the former city engineer. That lawsuit alleges a culture of corruption at City Hall. Chris Nepsey alleges he was fired for not following through on requests by the mayor and senior staff he says were for their political or personal gain. Mayor Drew Dilkens denied those allegations and says the city will defend itself against the claims. Here's what he said in response to the employee survey.
I was listening to the comment about the culture of fear and recognized that the survey was done before any of the events that were referred to in the councillor's comments. But at the end of the day, we don't have a culture of fear here. People, don't come to work fearful at the City of Windsor. We've got a great employment relationship with our employees here at all bargaining units and including the non-union employees. And what was the other question?
The idea of an old boys club. In the report as well, it talks about
yeah.
how it gives credit to the city for making advances in equity as it relates to gender, but says that there are still people who feel as if that they might be treated differently because of their gender.
Yeah, well, I don't see that, and having been here, for a number of years, I don't see that playing out. And I would be very sensitive to that if I heard that. And as I sat in the chair listening to those comments, I looked down at Dana Palladino, who's our acting commissioner of corporate services. I looked down at Janice Guthrie, who's our commissioner and our city treasurer. I looked down at Yelena Payne, who's leading economic development and building and planning. And so I think we have great leaders, and they're all doing a great job. I think we have great leaders at all levels in the organization.
With the first pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams.
Last night in Detroit, quarterback Caleb Williams named the NFL's top draft pick. He goes to the Chicago Bears on a big night for QBs. The first 3 picks were all quarterbacks. Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels went second to Washington, and Drake May was selected third by New England. In a first for the league, 5 quarterbacks are in the top 10 picks. And that's the moment that the Detroit Lions selected Terrion Arnold. The Lions traded up to select the Alabama cornerback with the 24th pick in the first round. It's a move that has been widely praised by fans. The NFL said Detroit set the all-time day one NFL draft record with more than 275,000 fans in attendance last night. Okay, Colette, we got to talk. I see those warm temperatures for tomorrow, but you know what else I'm seeing? Lots of rain. So please tell me the forecast is not as bad as it looks on my little iPhone app.
Well, I will tell you that, actually.
Okay.
Meg. Well, we know how those apps just kind of show you one thing, and if there's rain anywhere or even any percentage chance, tends to put that on the icon. So I'm not saying it's great.
Okay.
But there will be moments. So maybe I can kind of take us through piece by piece and try and find where those moments will be. But let's just start off with a bit of review, all right, with the almanac. A normal high for this time of year, now where we're at the end of April, 17 for a daytime high and 5 for a low. And it is not unusual to have temperatures go into the 20s. And in fact, the record high, yeah, you see it there, over 30 degrees. Well, how about our current temperatures? We are now at 16. We've fallen off a little bit. So we were actually at that normal high for today, and now we're just dipped to 16. But Sarnia at 18, Chatham, Kent, you see there, 13 degrees. We do have that easterly flow of the winds, sustained winds there, and these are the gusts, which at times have definitely been over and will be this evening over that 40 kilometers an hour. Increasing cloudiness too as the system is approaching us. There are a lot of facets to this next system coming in. Some of the worst of it, I think you can see where that might be through the Midwest here, down through Tornado Alley. Look at all the lightning strikes. And if we take a look, in fact, at what's going on, like all these areas here, there are severe thunderstorm watches, but there are also tornado watches. And where you see in red, these are tornado warnings down through not only Texas, but into Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. A large area under threat from that severe weather again today. And that's going to be not that far off that place, those areas, for another couple of days. So that movement not changing much. This movement clearly is. This is the rain headed our way. So overnight tonight, we start to see this, even late this evening. And then batch at times heavier, 7 a.m. All right, we still got another wave to come through. But once that wave goes through, tomorrow afternoon, I think is going to be pretty nice, actually. We'll have a nice bright spot there. And then even as we go into Sunday, you're going to find it's a bit hit and miss. The problem is when we do have stuff, there could be some heavier downpours there with some thunderstorms, some embedded thunderstorms, all right? Most of that active weather, though, staying back there towards the Midwest or just approaching the Ohio Valley. So be aware, tomorrow afternoon looks good. Parts of Sunday look good. Just keep your eyes to the sky and be aware of what's going on. Overnight temperatures, that's at about 2 a.m. They'll actually be rising from there towards tomorrow morning, and they'll keep on going. So 25 by tomorrow afternoon. Sunday, 25. Meg, it's going to feel like we're in the 30s with that humidity.
Wow, Colette.
I haven't used that word in a while. I got to dust it off.
Over it. Well, thanks so much for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
A new host of CBC Radio's Afternoon Drive has been announced starting Monday. It's Matt Allen's voice you're going to hear on the local airwaves. He grew up in southwestern Ontario, but left to pursue a career in journalism. Now he's back, and today he was in Windsor, so we had to tour him around to get a little slice of Windsor life.
What are you best known for?
Like signature, super, and Angry Hawaiian.
Yeah?
Angry Hawaiian is the best.
Okay, we got our Windsor pizza and we're heading out.
Like all these really cool, like little Windsor things that I didn't necessarily know about before coming here is really neat.
Yeah, there's a culture around pizza and we take it really seriously.
Apparently, I really love, you hear like Windsor and Detroit have this symbiotic relationship, but you don't really appreciate it until you get here and you see the river, and then Detroit's like right there.
I'm gonna show you
Okay.
what Windsor pizza is all about. Okay, so first of all, yeah.
Nice.
The cheese is very specific. It's Galati cheese.
Okay.
We make that here in Windsor.
Yeah.
As you can see, the pepperoni is shredded.
It is,
so
yes.
that it's evenly distributed. These mushrooms come out of a can.
Okay, so what is special qualities and properties?
It's that they stay moist.
Okay,
Yes.
They don't get dried out.
Exactly.
Oh, to Windsor pizza. Oh yeah,
Yeah?
that's good. I really like the crust.
Mm-hmm.
The crust is really like crisp and good. Lots of flavor.
This
Really good.
is like my childhood in a bite. Like, this feels so
Is it bringing
at
back
home.
memories?
It does, it does.
Are you
so
picturing
many
things now?
birthday parties and
That's really cool.
So what are you most excited for about this job?
I grew up in Southwest Ontario, but you don't always get to explore all the regions of where you live. And getting to spend, this job really allows you to spend time and get embedded in the communities that you're covering. You know this, right? And so I'm really excited to learn as much as I can. I don't know as much as I would like to about Windsor. I want to learn more about Windsor. All the stuff that you guys have been sharing, Sarnia, Chatham-Kent, Leamington, like all of these communities that make up Southwest Ontario. Really excited to get to know them, get to know the people. If our show can be a hub, you know what I mean? A hub of conversation for all of these places, that would be really cool. The stories that the people have to share and highlighting what makes them uniquely them. I think there's something about that resonates with everybody, no matter where you're from. Because again, Windsor and London are two different cities, right? But the people at their heart are the same. So I think that's what I really want to focus on, is really trying to bring the human element out of everything that we do.
I think we could cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Yes. Really good.
Oh, God.
They're so good.
As we enjoy the beautiful weather today, it's almost unimaginable that 40 years ago this week, parts of the St. Clair River were completely jammed with ice, creating a major problem for crews. Former CBC Windsor reporter Paul Patterson was invited onto the Bristol Bay tugboat in 1984 to see just how bad the situation was.
The massive Coast Guard effort to clear the St. Clair River of ice is about to enter its third week. Today, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Bristol Bay put a group of reporters aboard the operation flagship, the Mackinac. Coast Guard efforts have been partially successful. Today, for the first time in a week, the George A. Stinson was freed from the spot where it ran aground. Other ships are slowly moving through the system, and more convoys will begin again tomorrow. But in the meantime, the ice is taking its toll on men and ships. The Mackinac has been out almost nonstop for 2 weeks. And while the officers on the bridge are busy with the ice-breaking operation, for the men below, time is passing slowly.
Accommodations are right next to the engineering spaces, the engine rooms, and you can hear the roar of the engines in the background now. It's not too conducive for sleep.
One seaman described it another way. He said the crew was getting ragged. There's only so much time you can spend playing video games in the rec hall.
It's starting to get a little bit tedious. You know, a little bit of boredom starting to set in with the crew. Especially with the married people, they're starting to look forward to getting home to their families and that sort of thing.
There's always a lot of food on board ship, but when men don't have much work to do, they tend to lose their appetites.
It's getting kind of boring for the guys, and guys are just losing their appetite, just waiting around.
Entertaining reporters on board the Mackinac was a welcome break for these men, who don't know how long they will have to stay on board during the tedious routine of ice-breaking.
Well, there are so many cool events happening in Detroit this weekend with the NFL draft in town. We spotted one from here on this side of the border. Our tower cam picking this up. That's a look at the Detroit Fireboat. It was putting on a show earlier today for lots of people standing on the Detroit side of the border. Coming up, Josiah Sinanen is here with his Week's End segment. Stay tuned. Joining us now is Josiah Sinin for his Week's End segment. Josiah, I understand you got a spooky one for us this week.
That's right, Meg, and I'm glad you used those words. I'll explain it a little bit more. Now, listen, I know that you're a county girl. You grew up in Essex County.
That is me.
That's your spiel.
I'm a county girl.
So I have a question for you. Have you heard of Olinda, Ontario?
I have never heard of Olinda. I don't know if I should be ashamed of that, but I haven't.
Well, you're not alone.
Okay.
Not a lot of people know about it, and if you look up Olinda on a map today, you'll see it as a small mark just north of Leamington. Meg, I'm going to tell you all about this mysterious place. At one point, it used to be home to 2/3 of the county's population. That was way back in the 1830s. This was a planned town, and people started to settle there around the 1790s, Upper Canada. And back then, you had some major areas around Essex County. Amherstburg was the military base. Sandwich was the political one. Olinda was where you'd go for work. So some interesting things about this town. It's actually located at one of the highest points in the county, and there is iron there. So it became a major iron mining and smelting town, which is something that's super rare in southwestern Ontario. And at the time, they would make horseshoes, pots and pans, hinges for doors, and they'd send them to Toledo, Detroit, the Upper Lakes. It was a hub, and eventually it got a school, a general store, and became a village. And today, Meg, the reason you might not have heard of it is because it's labeled as Essex County's only ghost town.
Okay, Josiah, I knew nothing about this, and I actually grew up relatively close, so I'm a little embarrassed about that. The only thing is I don't like the words ghost and town right next to each other.
Yeah, and I want you to think less about spirits and more about it being abandoned.
Okay, fair,
So,
fair.
yes. I spoke to our local historian, Chris Carter, about this for Afternoon Drive today. He first found out about Olinda from a paragraph in a ghost town book, again, abandoned, not haunted, and he discovered that his family owned a lot of the town.
You know, there's something here. There's more than just a small community that started up. And so, yeah, I checked into the whole system and the whole city. It was a proper planned town. And believe it or not, my relatives own most of the town. Well, it was all the main part of the town was actually on their farms.
So Meg, this is something that Carter has done more research on after he made that discovery, and he's kind of become the resident expert on what Olinda once was, and he's actually leading a community walk to discover what's left of the town tomorrow morning. He doesn't do this very often, so this is a chance for everyone to actually experience this forgotten history and learn more.
And what do we need to know about the walk?
Yeah, so the details, Meg, he is leading this tour of Olinda as part of a Jane's Walk. So that's a series of community-led hikes happening throughout our area. If you want to join him, you can meet him at the Universalist Church in Ruthven tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. It'll be about an hour long. You'll get to see some old cemeteries, old roads of the town, and some of the building foundations. And if you can't make it, you can check out our full interview with Chris on the CBC Listen app by searching for Afternoon Drive.
Sounds fascinating as always. Thank you so much,
Thank
Josiah.
you so much, Meg.
Are you a history buff or have an interest in the Titanic? Some items are going up for auction. More on that coming up. A destructive insect could provide a key to constructing climate-smart buildings. Termites create mounds that could prove inspiration for future energy-saving designs. A Swedish researcher is studying their lattice-like network of channels and tunnels that feature built-in climate control without the carbon footprint.
Termites are absolutely incredible at constructing. They work with very limited resources, and they work with materials that are entirely sourced from their environment. And what is incredible about them is that you can find one termite species living in one place on Earth where they have certain conditions in terms of its climate, but also the soil composition. And then you have another species that lives in slightly different conditions, and they will have a very different strategy. One of the fascinating things that the termite mound does is that it maintains a humid internal climate, even though it sits almost in the desert in a very arid environment. So what we hope to do is use the geometries and the mechanisms found in the mound skin to control the way that a building adapts to its environment and the way that it actually exchanges moisture, heat, air. So this is the Meristem wall, and it's a project or a prototype we created as a response to the termite research. And it incorporates the network and the specific channels and their effects that we discovered in the laboratory experiments. But we also wanted to investigate what it means to take it to an architectural component. We have to incorporate not only the channel network of the termite mound, but also functions such as electricity and water pipes, windows, and thinking about how this might act as a facade in an urban environment of a building. Termites build generally from mud or earth and clay, but they also live in symbiosis with a fungus. And they create these structures inside of the mound called fungus combs. So we were exploring whether it was possible to use a similar system for architectural materials. And it is actually one of the first examples in the world of a structure that's been 3D printed from live fungus and wood as a mixture together. It's actually the network of mycelium, the root system of the fungus, that binds together all of the wooden particles into a solid material that we could potentially use to build buildings from. That would be grown both from wood or similar materials and from the fungus itself into things that are usable and we can make architecture from.
The young killer whale trapped for more than a month in a BC lagoon is finally free. Quisaheas, or Little Hunter, had been bottlenecked by a sandbar. The local First Nations leading the rescue say the orca swam over it on her own this morning at high tide. They say the team is ecstatic, although she still has to reach open ocean. The calf has been trapped in the lagoon since March 23rd when her pregnant mother was beached and died at low tide. The team is now encouraging her out towards the ocean, where it's hoped she will be able to connect with her family pod. A British auction house is selling 2 items this weekend from one of the world's most compelling disasters, the sinking of the Titanic. The ship was a marvel, but an iceberg sent her to the ocean floor. 1,500 people died. 2 of the most famous owned what's being auctioned. One was John Jacob Astor, the richest man on board. A gold pocket watch was recovered from his body. His son had it restored and eventually gave it away as a christening gift. The other was Wallace Hartley, Titanic's orchestra leader, just 33, being auctioned his violin bag. Hartley was one of the musicians who, as Titanic's fate became clear, famously performed on the deck. That's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here next week.